A very good morning to everybody. Welcome to the poster podium presentation on comprehensive ophthalmology competition. We'll start right away. The first presenter will be Dr. Sasikala Elizabeth Anil Kumar. She will be presenting a retrospective analysis on needle stick injuries in a high volume tertiary eye care center.
Sir, are my slides visible?
Yes.
Can I start?
Yes, please.
So my topic is on a retrospective analysis of needle stick injury in a high volume hospital. NSIs are the second most common cause of operational injury. Bloodborne virus infection, among it, hepatitis B vaccine accounts for the most infection with sharp injuries, and the risk of transmission is high, and only hepatitis B vaccine has an effective vaccine. So why the study? The ophthalmologist specialty as such is more predominantly surgical in nature and most microsurgical. There's increased likelihood of instrument mishandling. Surgeon have to operate under magnification and background lighting is minimal. And also there are minimal literature supporting and reporting the ophthalmic surgeries related NSI. Our aim is to assess the incidence outcome of NSI in a tertiary eye hospital. We performed a retrospective study for 36 months, starting from January 2017 to December 2019. NSI was defined as any percutaneous exposure where the skin has been broken by the needle or any sharp objects contaminated by blood or any bodily fluid. A study group involved patients, the staff, ophthalmologists, ophthalmic postgraduates, fellows, nursing staff, lab technicians, housekeeping staff, and maintenance staff. Data regarding the detail of the individual incident, site of the incident, device that caused the injury, the mechanism of injury, hepatitis B vaccination status of the patient, of the staff, the post-exposure management performed, BBV test of the injured person as well as the patient were recorded. Based on the Excel sheet, we could take the data. Standard NSI protocol exists in the institution of what to do during HCV positive, HIV positive, and HBV positive, what to do with the titers, and if the source is unknown, what to do, the protocols do exist. So coming on to the results, we had totally over the last 3 years, 173 NSIs reported. In the OT complex alone, we had 124 among 249,000 surgeries that were performed roughly. So the incidence was calculated for the year of 2017 as 0.03, 18 and 19 as 0.05. Based on the location, operating theater had the maximum for 76.80. Among the staff, nursing staff had the maximum NSI reported 50.20, followed by doctors 37%. Based on the year distribution, staff-wise, the nursing staff had the increased NSI being reported and in an increasing pattern over the years. And based on the area-wise distribution, we had more in the OT and with an increasing trend. Based on the step-wise also, we had more amount of NSIs happening during the surgeries, and the instrument that was causing was 91% was reported to be because of the side port and the keratome. So coming on to the overall results, the side port and the needle resulted in 37.6 and 55.6. Rest were because of the biochemical waste, 6.7%. The side port blades injury was caused by the junior surgeons in 84% of the cases and senior surgeon in 16. Sub-analysis showed that 4% only of cases were in the retina procedures, and in the lab 3%. So coming on to our results significantly denotes that self-reported NSI do exist, and more in the operating rooms, more among the nurses, among the junior doctors while passing the instruments. 5-year study of Rishi shows 0.07. Our study is a little closer to the reports. The recommendation that would provide from the study is standard protocol should exist. Puncture-proof containers should be used. PPEs have to be used properly by the biomedical staff and the other staff. Definitely, there has to be reported to the infection control nurse. A true picture we need to know. Avoid recapping the needles and dispose the needles whenever possible in the needle cutter container. To conclude, this study proves that an ongoing training for needle stick injury has to be taken in institution at all levels. Our results shows that there is a rising trend among the nurses and the other supportive staff. This could be because of the increased awareness and better reporting. So most of the NSIs are proved in the study to be happening in the theater during cataract surgery, during instrument handling among the junior doctors. So it is important for us to focus on better training, instrument handling for the junior doctors, and stress it during the surgical training and also in wet lab training. These are my references. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sasikala.
Yes.
Nanda sir, you would like to ask a question? Nanda sir. Sir, you are muted, sir.
Dr. Sasikala, can we really prevent it?
So needle-stick injuries during the surgical procedures definitely can be prevented by better training. So that's what was our conclusion. So training will definitely bring down the risk of needle-stick injury. Awareness. So initiating an induction training as soon as the staff join in, categorizing them into the high risk and the moderate risk, and providing them continuous training will definitely bring down and prevent infections, prevent the needle-stick injury incidents.
Okay, have you seen it with your training?
Which training, sir?
Have you given some training?
Handle. Yes, sir, definitely. As part of the training program, as soon as any staff who joins, who are into the high-risk staff and moderate-risk staff, other than the technical staff who are in the office.
No. After the training, have you seen the results? Compared the results?
It is an ongoing training from the onset when we started having the NABH program from 2017.
No. My question is, after training, have you compared the results?
Better reporting. This is the third year, sir, of our thing. We are only seeing an increasing trend because of the better reporting. So maybe when we are continuing, we are planning to do it for the COVID time 2020 and 21 as well. So definitely we'll see whether it has come. The other issue is this is a constantly changing staff pattern. So the junior fellows or the junior MOs or the medical people who are helping in the assisting are constantly changing.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Marathe sir, would you like to ask a quick question? We have 20 seconds.
No, it's fine.
No,
Dr.
sir.
Srini? Dr. Srini?
See, the side port injury is more with the nurses or the junior surgeons?
So the incidents when we recorded, it was when the junior doctors were passing the instrument back after the entry, it was recorded more.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next speaker, Dr. Pallavi Rai Chaudhary.
Yes, sir. I leave the hall for my next presentation.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Dr. Srini. Sasikala. We would like to welcome the next speaker, Dr. Pallavi Rai Chaudhary, who will be speaking on spectrum of HIV ophthalmopathy among patients of ART and its correlation with CD4 T cell count.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Pallavi, please.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
May I please share your screen?
Yes, sir. Is it visible now?
No, ma'am, please share screen, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah, now it's
visible. Yeah, visible. Okay.
Put on slideshow, ma'am, please.
Yes. Yes, now visible. Okay. Good morning, respected judges and delegates. I am here to present the spectrum of HIV ophthalmopathy among the patients of antiretroviral therapy and its correlation with CD4 T cell count. Studies have demonstrated that 40 to 45% of HIV-infected patients have some form of ophthalmic manifestations, but previous prevalence studies generally done within populations who are selected on the basis of symptoms or ophthalmological referral. But the aim of my study is to conduct an epidemiological survey to analyze the prevalence and HIV-related eye involvement in all newly diagnosed HIV patients prior to the start of antiretroviral therapy. This is a cross-sectional study which is done among 271 newly diagnosed HIV-infected patients over 1 year. The diagnosis of ocular HIV was based on suggestive ocular lesion with systemic infection and data interpreted accordingly. And we have seen that 33.6% patients have some form of ophthalmic involvement and majority of them are male. 17.4% patients have both eye involved and 14.3% of them have low vision. Most commonly involved structure was posterior segment, and we have found that even with ophthalmic involvement, most of them were completely asymptomatic. And we have also found that patients with comorbidity, like some form of hemophilia or thalassemia, they have more chances of ophthalmic involvement in HIV. This is the final summary of involved structure. And we have seen that ophthalmological manifestation is least common in HIV patients. And we have also seen that with increased stages of HIV, chances of ophthalmic involvement is more, and it is also seen more commonly with decreased CD4 count. These are pictures of ophthalmic involvement in HIV patients. And the frequency of ocular manifestation is 33.6% in our study, which is also corroborative in study conducted in Ethiopia. And study conducted by Pathai et al. Also found that 80% patient of HIV infected patients, they have normal vision, which is corroborative with our study. Our study is also corroborative with study done by Listo Bien et al., who also showed that posterior segment involvement is more in case of HIV. In our study, we found that 46.2% patients were completely asymptomatic, even they have ophthalmic involvement. This is also noted in a study done by Pathai et al. Also, he has shown that prevalence of ophthalmic lesion associated with HIV is higher in patients with WHO clinical stage 3 or 4. And this is corroborative with our study also done by Jabs et al. Now we can conclude that the severity of ocular infection in HIV or AIDS in the form of visual impairment was higher in patients with low CD4 count and advanced stages of HIV. So when HIV infected patients come to our antiretroviral therapy clinic, a multidisciplinary approach along with proper ophthalmological evaluation is a must. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pallavi. I have a question. Did you take any comorbidities into account? Suppose a patient who had HIV and had diabetes had a higher incidence of the disease that you have shown?
Yes, I have taken the patients with comorbidity, and I have seen that if they have more chances of ophthalmic involvement, but any other kind of immunodeficiency disorder, if they have, other than HIV, we have excluded that patient.
A quick question by Dr. Nanda, sir. Sir, you are muted, sir.
Okay. Any result you have? Yes, Marathi sir, you can ask.
No. Sir, you continue after your question.
No, you ask him. No problem.
Oh, it is not my question. Sir, please.
You just go on here.
Okay, okay. Dr. Pallavi, have you observed that number of cases over the years? What's your observation? Is going down or going up?
Sir, it is going up, definitely. And I have also seen that it is more common in urban population.
Okay. And
the reporting by the male is more. Male patients in our antiretroviral therapy is more.
What I have learned that recently, means over the years, I think the number is not that way increasing in case of HIV.
Okay. Next question by Nanda, sir.
Unmute, sir. Unmute yourself.
Thank you, Pallavi. No problem.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Next, Dr. Srini.
See, Dr. Pallavi,
yes,
see, what have you observed? At what point are these people coming for an ophthalmic evaluation, and at what point are the treating physicians actually sending the patients for ophthalmic evaluation? And is there a trend in earlier referral for ophthalmic evaluation?
Sir, actually, I have taken all the patients who came for antiretroviral therapy irrespective of their referral, because previous studies have done only if there is symptom present or if there is ophthalmological referral. But my study is irrespective of referral. I have taken all the new patients who are starting to their antiretroviral therapy.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next speaker. Thank you, Dr. Pallavi.
Yes.
Dr. Purnima is here?
No, sir.
Purnima is not. Okay. So can we go to Dr. Srinila Anil Kumar? Dr. Srinila?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Dr. Srinila will be speaking on extraocular use of intraocular lenses. Please start. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Don't start the timer yet, please. Can you reset it? Thanks. Okay, start.
Thank you.
Good morning, one and all. I welcome all the judges. So, in this world of smartphone photography, I will be discussing about extraocular use of intraocular lens. This is mainly used to record the ocular finding for documentation, expert opinion, academics, teleophthalmology, and patient education. So our main aim is to evaluate the efficacy of anterior segment photography with intraocular lens to capture images of sufficient quality to identify eye findings, to assess reproducibility and subject image quality. Anterior segment photography with ASPE is a simple smartphone device attached to which is an IOL, which helps us to take good quality anterior segment photograph without the help of a slit lamp. So for this, we need 8 centimeter into 1.5 centimeter long hard strip into which we fold it half, and into one half, we attach the double-sided tape. With the help of a puncher, we make 2 holes. Then we need a single piece PMMA IOL, which is inserted to one side, and then it is folded upon itself to seal the IOL inside. Paste this on the camera of the smartphone, and then you can start taking pictures of your ocular finding. So this was a study that was done in a general OPD, Aravind Eye Hospital, Coimbatore. It's a hospital-based comparative study. We had a minimal sample size of 169, and all the patients who were attending the general OPD were included. The patients who consented to agree to take the anterior segment findings were only included. Patients of any age, gender were included. And the patients with photophobia and patients who did not consent for the study were not included. The data was collected after taking an informed consent. Detailed history was taken, age, sex, visual acuity. Ocular examination was then done by a medical officer using a slit lamp biomicroscope, which was a gold standard diagnosis. Images were obtained from both slit lamp camera and ASPE. They were then transferred to an iPad and then were given to 2 different medical officers, each for diagnosis and grading of the image quality. Grading of image quality was done based on noise, sharpness, contrast, diagnostic confidence, artifacts, and blotchy appearance, and they were graded from 1 to 5, 1 being the best and 5 being the worst. Data analysis one done by Microsoft Excel. These were the pictures that we had clicked through our tool. These are all unedited pictures. They were only cropped to fit into the slide. This was a result out of the 200 patients, 114 were male and 86 were female. These are the general category of the patient's diagnosis that we had taken with the slit lamp. And this is the slide showing the image grading of the slit lamp photo and ASPE photos, where we can see that the slit lamp photos were graded 1 and ASPE photos were almost equal to this with a grade of 2. So ASPE is an easy do-it-yourself tool. It is very useful, recyclable, less skill-based. It's cheap, it's accessible, it is portable, which can be used to diagnose and screen ophthalmic findings at different setups like remote clinics, hospitals, camps, PHCs, and having no access to modern ophthalmic device. This device gives near best results compared to the slit lamp, which can lead to early diagnosis and treatment of various diseases. It's a preliminary step towards a screening of disease, but not a confirmatory test. So these are my references.
Thank you, Dr. Srinila. Have you mentioned the specific megapixel camera that you were using, which phone you were using?
It can be used with any phone, sir.
Okay, so the quality may vary according to the megapixel camera that you may have.
Yeah.
Dr. Nanda, sir?
What about the IOL power?
The IOL we use 15, 20, and 25 based on the magnification that we need.
What magnification? How much you calculate that?
We need a more magnified view, then we use 25 IOLs.
25 plus 25 you are using?
Yes, sir.
Does it work with myopic patients or any other patient or any specific thing? Any specificity about that changes?
No, sir. No changes, sir.
In the any change with the power?
We get a more
hypermetropia, high myopia, or any other changes with that. Does the IOL power vary?
No, sir, it doesn't mean. Only the magnified view of the picture. For that, we can use that, sir.
So only as Dr. Sinha has told, your smartphone will vary.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Next question by Marathe, sir.
Yeah, I think it was a very good innovative idea. I must congratulate you for that. One more thing is what intraocular lenses you have used. Are they fresh lenses purchased from the market?
No, sir. We used the lenses which were slipped or which became unsterile. So we use such things which went waste. We use them.
Is there any chance asking these IOL companies to provide that particular raw material for your photography? Yes, or it can be told to the camera companies to use that particular material in their cameras?
See, any material will do, sir. We've used PMMA. We can.
Okay. Cost-wise, what is it? Was a little more or less?
No, so it's only the cost of the IOL, sir. And that also we used the ones that were slipped and this thing. So it was minimal. We just needed a strip, a micro tape and adhesive, and that's it, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
One quick question by Dr. Srini.
Has we presented these data in other conference? Because I've seen him, Dr. Prithvi, present the same thing on in other conferences.
No, this data is taken from the general OPD, sir. Here, which was done here.
No, on the same technique.
Yeah. Yes, sir. The same technique was presented, sir.
Fine.
Has it been presented somewhere else also?
No, not sir. The study
not this data, but with this other data has been. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, doctor. We'll go on to the next speaker. Dr. Namrata is here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'd like to welcome Dr. Namrata. She will be speaking on ophthalmology residency during and after COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Namrata.
Good morning, everyone and revered judges. Today, I'm going to talk about ophthalmology residency during and after COVID-19 pandemic. We all know that ophtho residency has a triple mission.
Ma'am, please put on slideshow, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. We all know that it has a triple mission of clinical care, research, and patient care. So we have this COVID-19 pandemic has adversely affected the impact training of residents in all specialties of medicine, but surgical training has been impacted more adversely. Most of the offline didactic lectures, clinical rounds, and clinical rotations have been discontinued, and residents have been put in the care of COVID-positive patients, hampering their training in ophthalmology. This is an interview-based study over the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on ongoing learning of ophthalmologists in training, analyzing measures to curb the loss and idea to cope up with the after effects. We gave a standard questionnaire via online platform, which was filled in up by various residents from various parts of the country. This is the sample questions we gave, like the type of institution, the COVID center, year of residency, training, and whether they felt stressed and everything. And we got the suggestions regarding ways to cope up with the after effects. This is the result showing that most of the residents were from government institution doing MS and mostly have been posted in COVID duty and were not happy about it. OPD and OT patients have obviously decreased everywhere, but we have methods to keep in touch with the ophthalmology while posted elsewhere, like webinars, online lectures, and virtual conferences like the one we are having right now. Everywhere the patients have decreased, so it is hampering our surgical residency due to decreased outpatient volume and everything. We have less surgical volume, less exposure to the patients required in ophthalmology. Only emergency patients have been seen. Now, lectures have converted from group meetings to online video conferences over Zoom. International conferences have moved online. Dissemination of scientific findings by international speakers without the need of travel is being done. Large conferences cannot continue like this, but can have a virtual option later. Clinical research, only essential ones are permitted, and they need to adapt to account for future pandemics, including novel data acquisition, telemedicine, online questionnaire, and remote monitoring. Because of changes in outpatient practices, residents will become expert in telemedicine and remote monitoring, accelerating incorporation of artificial intelligence into clinical practice. We can have such virtual surgical simulators for basic cataract and vitreoretinal surgery training. Institutes can have roster-based skill lab posting of residents where they can perform surgical training on goat's eye, wax models, 3D models. Online surgical videos can be used. Online video-assisted surgical training can be done. And there can residents should be involved in non-technical skills like crisis management, teamwork, financial literacy, patient communication, etc. Peer groups should be there for mental and emotional health of the residents. Institutes can formulate revised guidelines for all patients-based clinical studies to make their sample size feasible so that the residents can complete the research and thesis products. Many changes in this practice during this pandemic will be accelerated and sustained and will become a part of the new normal after this COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Namrata. We understand your pain, and definitely All India Ophthalmic Society is looking into it. This paper is not for evaluation. However, Dr. Nanda sir, would you like to ask something?
Sir, it is a really interesting topic. Nobody wants in the COVID duty. Mostly ophthalmologist is also in a dilemma. So my students are also complaining, sir, please say that I will be doing this, that duty, and moreover also there. It is a scaring situation everywhere. So no question, Namrata. It is a general view. So thank you.
Can we have a question from Dr. Maratha, sir?
Yeah, I think. Dr. Namrata,
yes, sir?
What would have been the ideal situation according to you? Not the medical college, not the government telling you anything. What would have been the ideal solution on this?
Sir, ideal solution in COVID-19 situation?
No. About residents' role. Residents.
Yeah. So normally though we should be getting normal surgical exposure, like we should be getting SIC at least in final year. I'm a final year resident, but I haven't done even one single SICS complete case because of the reduced volume. And we are not even sure if our OT will open or how many cases we'll be getting. And that is a stressful condition because pandemic will be continued. Up to what extent, no one knows. And we'll be giving our final exams next year. And after that, we won't have that exposure to clinical skills and everything. And doing a fellowship later on is also hectic. No one wants to just continue studying, and we want to practice. We want to see the patients. We want to heal them. And if we don't get the exposure...
Okay. We understand your pain. Dr. Srini?
Dr. Namrata,
for everybody.
But everyone should do a fellowship because I mean we had done a survey on specifically on this. How COVID-19 affected across the spectrum. Yes. It's not just the residents; it's the fellows, even those in practice. In government sector, were the ones who were the most affected. Yes. So the suggestions actually it should be anybody has to go for fellowship training. Yes. The fellowship training they're just giving the fellowship certificate without enough training. So we have given some suggestions to through IJO. Let's see if it works out. It might help you out.
The fellowship can be in only one branch. That is PG. We get every other type of things we can do. In fellowship, we are restricted to only one thing. That is why PG residents should get some exposure.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Namrata. Hopefully things will be better very soon. We'd like to welcome the next speaker, Dr. Jitendra Jethani. And he will be speaking on effect of low concentration atropine eye drops on higher order aberrations. Dr. Jitendra Jethani.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Sure. Very good morning to all the judges. I will be talking on low concentration atropine and its effects on higher order aberration. We don't have any financial interest. We all know that wavefront aberrometry shines a perfectly shaped wave of light into the eye, and basically it captures the reflections distorted based on the eye's surface contours. So we can see that this is a perfect wavefront which is being put on or inside the eye. So it basically generates a map of the optical system of the eye, which can be used to map the imperfections that are seen. These are some of the higher order aberrations. With this background, I would like to say that we tried to do a study because on low concentration atropine, because after ATOM 1 and ATOM 2 studies, there has been a lot of interest in low concentration atropine, especially in children, for reducing the progression of myopia. So we started doing this study because there have been reports on atropine 1% causing significant increase in higher order aberrations. So it was very important to know whether in the long term, low concentration atropine is actually safe or not. So this was a study of 14 children which were taken in the study, and we started the patients on low concentration atropine. And these patients were actually, wavefront analysis was done pre-atropine. And then they were started on these drops, and we started taking the higher order aberration RMS, trefoil, tetrafoil, and we tried to compare after a month whether these higher order aberrations were significant enough compared to the pre-atropine data. And we found that, these higher order aberrations were not much changed. Although the pupil size, if we see the pupil size, it was increased by 0.8 millimeters as a mean increase in pupil size. Even the near point of accommodation was reduced by almost 2.8 to 3.5 diopters. So why this study on higher order aberrations on low concentration atropine? First and foremost is that we are going to use it for a pretty long time. So we should be aware whether it is actually safe or not. And there has been no such study across the world, although low concentration atropine has now been around for almost 8 to 10 years. In children, it may cause slow progressive problems like in contrast, and they may end up into having a little bit mild amblyopia may start because we are dealing here with a visually immature system. So this was just to contribute onto the safety profile of low concentration atropine. We all know that higher order aberrations are significantly affected by 1% atropine. Of course, the percentage is much higher. And we also have a background that aberrations are significantly associated in anisometropic amblyopia, which means that this study was done in India, and anisometropic amblyopia patients had significantly higher order aberrations. So these were the reasons why it was done. We have already done a study to see whether any pattern ERG changes are there or not. We know that there is a change in pupil size and reduced amplitude of accommodation. But fortunately, we found that there was not a significant change in higher order aberration despite a change in pupil size pre and post atropine. So we conclude that there are minimal changes which are not really significant in higher order aberrations when you use low concentration atropine, at least after a month. So long-term usage seems to be safe because we did not find much changes, but we can do more studies at a longer follow-up to find whether they are safe or not. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jethani. That was very scientific, very interesting, very thoughtful study. However, I found that the sample study size is a little small. Are you still continuing doing it, or?
Yes. So what we have done is we are following these patients for a long term, because this was only, so when we submitted the paper, that was I think around 1.5 years back. So that was just a thought. We thought that we should do it, and then we will follow it, because long term we are going to use them for long term, maybe a long term usage. So after a year, since you have asked, I am continuing that. After a year, we still did not find, I did not put it because we had already submitted the abstract. So I did not include that in the data.
Okay,
but even at the end of 1 year, we did not find any significant change in higher order aberrations.
Thank you. Dr. Nanda, sir?
Actually, this is a continuation study. You have told by part. So it will take little more time. And also the sample size is also less.
Dr. Marathe, sir?
I think it was the wonderful study done by Dr. Jethani. I must appreciate.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Srini?
How long are you planning to continue the follow-up? Like when are you short-term results? Encouraging. What is the time limit you feel that, okay, you've done it for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Now, okay, I can say that this is absolutely safe. Any idea like?
I think, sir, if it is not changing higher order aberrations in a year's time, I think it would be pretty safe to assume that it is quite safe. Although there have been studies on pattern ERG, we ourselves have done pattern ERG and found that it is safe, but pattern ERG is mainly about the posterior segment and not really about the optical path which light is following, and there may be subtle changes in higher order aberrations. I think 1 year would be a very good time. We already have the data for 1 year. Next, I mean, the Mumbai AIOS, we are planning to present them.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on to the next speaker. Dr. Santwana is here. Dr. Santwana Sagnika Pradhan?
No, sir.
No. Okay. So we have Dr. Preeti here. Okay.
Yes,
we'd like to welcome Dr. Preeti, and she will be speaking on a study depicting prevalence and causes of amblyopia in school-going children. Dr. Preeti, please.
Before starting, there is a question in the chat box by Dr. Namrata. Why she is not getting the marks? That is her query. Just evaluate that.
She is not a ratified member.
Okay.
Presenting author is not a ratified member. That's why she is not going to get marks.
Okay, Dr. Namrata, did you get the answer?
Sir? Hello, sir?
You are not a ratified member. That's why you are not going to get the marks. Okay.
Sir, just one doubt. So, sir, what is a rectified member?
Oh, you have to
we'll take care of that.
That will be told to you afterwards.
Anyway, good presentation, Namrata.
Okay, thank you, sir. I just
we are all with you. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Yeah, we'll take.
Dr. Preeti, please.
Good morning, sir. Myself, Dr. Preeti, I am presenting a study depicting prevalence.
Please share your screen, ma'am. Ma'am, please share your screen. Ma'am, please click share screen button in your Zoom.
Sir, I clicked, but it is not opening.
You have to first open it.
Green color arrow, share screen. At the bottom.
Ma'am, first of all, open your PPT. Yes.
Yeah. It is seen now. It is seen.
Okay, please go ahead.
You may start now.
The study depicting prevalence and causes of amblyopia in school-going children. Amblyopia is a Greek word which means blunting of vision. It indicates compromised vision, not complete blindness. It is also known as lazy eye and has become growing socioeconomic problem, as it is one of the most neglected common sensory anomalies of the eye. It is a condition with unilateral or bilateral subnormal vision without any local ophthalmoscopic abnormality, which is reversible if treated appropriately at the proper time. Causes of amblyopia are visual deprivation like congenital or infantile cataract, corneal opacity, ptosis, refractive errors, strabismus. Pathogenesis of amblyopia involves abnormal visual stimulation, which leads to abnormal visual development, which causes amblyopia. Types of amblyopia are stimulus deprivation amblyopia, anisometric amblyopia, ametropic, meridional, and strabismic amblyopia. It is a prospective observational cross-sectional study which involved 930 students of the 5 to 15 years of age. Study duration was 6 months. Methodology: visual acuity tested in children with defective vision were subjected to the ophthalmic examination like slit lamp examination, fundus examination, cycloplegic refraction. Observation and results of this studies: out of 930 participants, 18.8% had defective vision, out of which 17.09% had refractive error, while 1.72% had amblyopia, resulting into prevalence of amblyopia to be 1.72%. The main cause of amblyopia was found to be anisometropia, followed by strabismus, ametropia, visual deprivation. Amblyopia is found in more in the low socioeconomic background people. It is comparable to the meta-analysis study conducted by Hassan et al. Showing global and lowest and highest prevalence of amblyopia 0.05 and 8.08 respectively. The prevalence of amblyopia is 4.4% according to New Delhi study GVS Murthy et al. On 6,447 children from December 2000 to March 2001. Study conducted in Kurnool district of Andhra Pradesh showed amblyopia prevalence 6.6%. So conclusion of this study is amblyopia is an important cause of preventable blindness in children, and early diagnosis and its awareness among people can prevent visual impairment later in the life. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Nanda sir, you have a question?
No, nothing. Why you did the studies doesn't make me comfortable. Anyway, thank you. No problem.
Marathe sir? Marathe sir?
It's fine. Okay. No question.
Dr. Srini?
Dr. Preeti, why nobody's asking questions is because is there anything that new that you have brought out in your study? What we don't actually know.
Sir, actually, I did the study to find out the prevalence of amblyopia in Bhopal region. I did study this in the Bhopal region.
So, did you compare with other regions or? That's fine. That's fine. Okay. Yes. Okay. Fine.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Srini. Dr. Namrata, you are there? Dr. Namrata?
Yeah, she is there.
Sir?
Dr. Namrata?
Yes, sir.
I'll just do my homework in the back office. When did you apply for membership?
Sir, 1 year ago, I have a membership number.
Okay. I'll take care of that.
Dr. Satya, maybe we can give her marks and
I'll just everybody will be giving her the marks.
Yeah, we will give the marks and
see, Dr. Namrata.
I'm sorry for disturbing.
Once you apply, you must get ratified in the next GBM. If you are not ratified in the last GBM, you are not the ratified member. Correct, now you will be getting ratified in this particular GBM, and then you will be the ratified member. I think that is the definition what I know.
I just asked you because we didn't want to sound unfair to you. So we'll do our homework. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, we will be giving you marks if you are actually a ratified member. You'll be considered.
Thank you, sir. I just had a doubt.
Thank you,
sir. Okay. Sorry for disturbing.
We would like to welcome the next speaker, Dr. Ronak Patel. He will be speaking on a randomized study to compare efficacy of 2% rebapimide and 0.05% cyclosporin eye drops in DED, dry eye disease.
Good morning, everyone.
Can you put on slideshow, sir?
Yes, sir.
Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Our randomized hospital-based study to compare efficacy of 2% rebapimide and 0.05% cyclosporin eye drops in dry eye disease. Introduction. Dry eye disease is an important public health problem, and most common drugs used for dry eye disease is carboxymethyl cellulose, which provides palliative relief in patients with aqueous tear deficiency, but do not treat the underlying mucin deficiency inflammation, or it does not reverse the conjunctival squamous metaplasia in chronic dry eye disease. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes.
Cyclosporin is a topical immunomodulator drug with an anti-inflammatory activity, and rebapimide is a mucin stimulator drug which helps in increase in mucin secretion. It's a mucin secretagogue drug. Both rebapimide and cyclosporin are known to increase goblet cell density and thus helps in improving tear film stability by augmenting mucin secretions. And in addition to that, both drugs improve patients of dry eye disease through modulation of ocular surface inflammation. As treatment of dry eye disease is evolving daily, in our study we wanted to compare two relatively newer drugs, those are which are having similar abilities to treat underlying cause for the dry eye disease. Our aim was to compare these two drugs, and objective was to study these two drugs individually and to compare these two drugs. Total 80 patients were taken, and those were divided randomly into two groups. Group A was In group A, patients were given 0.5% CMC plus 0.05% cyclosporin for 12 weeks. In group 2, patients were given 0.5% CMC and 2% imamapide for 12 weeks. The effect was evaluated by means of change in Schirmer-1, TBUT, OSDI score, and NEI's corneal staining score at 4, 8, and 12 weeks. And all the patients coming to OPD department, outpatient department, greater than 18 years of age were included. And the patients with blepharitis, ocular allergies, connective tissue disorders, lid disorders were excluded from our study. And what we have found is in group A, that was with cyclosporin and the CMC, the mean TBUT value, the mean Schirmer value, mean OSDI and NEI staining score was increased after 12 weeks of treatment, and that was of statistical significance. The similar studies showed similar results. And in group B also, we found that mean TBUT value and Schirmer 1 value, OSDI and NEI staining score was increased after 12 weeks of treatment, and that was statistically significant. Kaori Ueda did a similar studies, and they also found the similar results. We have also compared these two drugs, these results of these two individual drugs, and what we have found, we can show from the graphs also, that Schirmer 1 was improved more in group A, and that was statistically significant. That was in cyclosporin group. And TBUT and OSDI was more improved in ribamipide group, and that was also statistically significant. And the mean NEI was improved in group 2, but that was not statistically significant. That concludes that the group A shows more improvement in Schirmer 1, and group B shows more improvement in TBUT, OSDI, and NEI staining scores. Since this was a pioneer study that compared the role of topical cyclosporin and topical ribamipide drugs, the results could not be compared and discussed with the literature. Most medicines available in the market targets only symptomatic relief, but ribamipide helps in treating the dry eye disease and shows promising results. And what we have concluded is both the drugs, cyclosporin and ribamipide, helps in improving subjective signs and objective signs and subjective symptoms, but the ribamipide scored over cyclosporin. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Nanda sir, you have a question?
Yes, Ronak.
Yes, sir.
You don't, the mode of action of cyclosporin and ribamipide are two different things. The cyclosporin takes a little longer time, 3 months at least. And ribamipide, the cause is also goblet cell and all those things. So all the dry eye diseases does not show significant improvement into these drugs. So how the sample size is randomly you have taken anybody dry eye disease more than 18 years you have taken. Is there any specific you have taken?
No, sir. No, sir. The sample size was not that much specified, but to justify this thing, we have added CMC in both the groups to give aqueous deficiency, immediate treatment to aqueous deficiency.
Yeah,
that was in both the groups, sir. CMC.
So when the CMC was added in both the groups, the result will vary with that thing, no?
Yes, sir. But
you should have given a single drug treatment. You should have, at least in a dry and simple cases also.
Yes, sir. So we'll have the next question, sir. Marathe, sir.
I think no question, but one comment. I think next generation uses short forms so much, at least in the first slide, and when there is a subject,
Correct.
you should not write DED. Okay. So at least write dry eye diseases at least in the first slide, or wherever it is a printing format in the subject or heading. DED, that short form should be avoided, and dry eye disease should be written. That is my observation.
Okay, sir.
Ronak, please take this advice from senior sir very, very seriously for so much, all times to come.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask Dr. Srini for a question.
Yeah, Ronak. Did you have divided groups, like you have evaporative dry eye and aqueous deficiency dry eye? Did you divide it into two groups and do the study? And the second question, see how these two chemicals are not really comparable, right? So cyclosporin and tacrolimus, yeah, you can compare. Ribamipide is not an immunomodulator. So why did you actually think of the study at all?
Sir, at the long term, ribamipide also, the study showed that ribamipide also has effect on inflammatory activity. It lowers inflammation and ultimately increases the goblet cell density. And on cyclosporin studies also showed that these ocular surface inflammation reduction, which leads to increase in goblet cell density. So
Ribampreptide is an amino acid analog of quinolone, right?
Yes.
So it is not actually a immunomodulator, right?
Yeah, no. Direction is not on. It's not a direct immunomodulator. Sir.
Okay, fine.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ronak. We'll move on to the next speaker. Dr. Meenakshi Chinara is here.
Yes, sir. I'm present. Good morning, sir.
Okay. Dr. Meenakshi will be speaking on prevalence of asthenopia during COVID era in Tertiary Eye Care Center of Eastern India. Dr. Meenakshi, please.
Sir, is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, every judges. So my topic for today is prevalence of asthenopia during COVID era in a tertiary eye care center of Eastern India, and I have no financial interest. So coming on to the introduction, asthenopia, it refers to a group of non-specific symptoms which includes tiredness, aching, irritation, watering, dryness of eye strain, burning sensation, blurred vision, difficult vision, then visual discomfort and headache. So presence of one or more symptom is termed as asthenopia, and the risk factors which are associated with asthenopia is visual symptom disorders, environmental factors, psychological factors, increased use of digital screens, and prolonged your work for more than 6 hours. So my aim is to study the prevalence of asthenopia during a month of April to June 2020. Coming under the materials and methods, it was a retrospective observational study with 103 patients at JPM Rotary Eye Hospital, and it was conducted for 3 months period from April 2020 to June 2020, and the patients were evaluated under the following headings: the history taking, that included the duration of digital screen use per day, corrected and uncorrected visual acuity was taken, objective subjective refraction, cover test, alternate cover test, amplitude of accommodation, near point of convergence, and fundus evaluation was also done. And the inclusion criteria, it included subjects between age 10 to 50 years with at least one symptom of asthenopia. And the exclusion criteria, it included best corrected visual acuity of no less than 6/12 in either eyes, strabismus, any ocular systemic disease affecting the accommodation and binocular vision, or any use of ocular systemic medication that affect the accommodation and binocular vision. My study showed that out of the total study subjects, 70.8% were male and 29.2% were females, and 45% belong to age group of 30 to 50, and 33 belong to 20 to 30 years of age group, and 22% they belong to 20 to 30, 33% belong to 10 to 20 years of age group. And eye pain was the most common presenting symptom in 27% of the patients, and headache, it was present in 21%, blurring of vision in 19% of the patients, dry eye in 15%, watering and other symptoms were present in 9% each. So out of the total study subjects, 73% were associated with digital screen use for more than 6 hours. Among them, 48% were having no refractive error, and 25% were having stable refractive errors. And the other belong to category where psychological factors, environmental factors, and they were having some kind of refractive errors. So this coming in males, but Malel et al. They showed the prevalence was more in females, and Han et al. They showed there was no gender difference. In our study, we found that the prevalence was more in 30 to 50 years of age group, followed by 10 to 20 years of age group, whereas Bhandari et al. And Mosi et al. Found that the asthenopia prevalence increases with age. Then in our study, we found eye pain was the most common symptom, followed by headache and blurring of vision, whereas other studies like Alexander, they showed headache was the most common symptom, and Mackey et al. They showed that near blur was the most common symptom. In our study, we found 73% with digital screen use for more than 6 hours, whereas Mosi et al. Showed no such association. So concluding my study, asthenopia was more prevalent in 30 to 50 years of age group, followed by 10 to 20 years of age group. Eye pain was the most common presenting symptom, and 73% were associated with digital screen use for more than 6 hours. So the increased prevalence of asthenopia was probably due to the prolonged near work, which may be due to work from home or online classes when the teaching institutes and office was closed during COVID pandemics. So this is how COVID affected us, and these are my references. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meenakshi. I believe there are many variables that we have to take into consideration, but first question by Dr. Nanda, sir.
Sir, actually, Meenakshi, you have done a very small study. It is only 3 months, April 20 to June 20. The corona has not affected that much during that phase, and people
yes, sir,
your patients may not be there. So all the patients might have before that. So during this phase, also the time phase is very small. So you told that 6 hours work. So I think the lockdown started in March, I think.
Yes, sir. So, it started by March end.
So and by April, your study started.
Yes, sir.
So within a month or within 15 days, how can the person show that it is due to corona time? This study has been done during the corona time only. So yes, this time period is very small, and this asthenospatia and all this general question, you should have done a longer period, at least 6 months, minimum 6 months or 2 months.
Thank you, sir. Next question by Marathe, sir.
No question.
Dr.
Sir, wonderful. Following the patients, I am still following, sir, since I submitted the abstract by June. So that was a very small duration, and that is the limitation of my study.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Srini, please.
Any suggestions that we don't know of?
Avoid computer, sir. Srini, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Meenakshi.
So,
thank you, Dr. Meenakshi.
Once again, Satyajit, sir.
Yes, please.
Who are absent, just ask them whether they are.
Yes, Dr. Purnima is here. That's what I was exactly going to do. Dr. Purnima is here.
Not yet, sir.
No, sir. Okay, keep him absent.
And Dr. Santwana Sagnika?
Not yet, sir.
Yes, absent.
Okay, and I just want to put it on record that Dr. Namrata Shri is not a ratified member. Dr. Namrata Sharma has confirmed just now. So that brings us to the end of this session. I would like to thank all the speakers and all the judges, hall coordinator for this wonderful program. Now you have to take a picture of your marks, and you have to send it to the phone number and the email ID that is there.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Satyajit, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Speakers.
Thank you, Dr. Satyajit, Dr. Srini, Dr. Nanda, sir, and all of you.
This is
all the presenters were fantastic, and it was nice.
Thank you so much.
And sitting at home, we have enjoyed Kolkata conference. Sitting here.
Yeah, at least we have seen each other.
Yeah, that's true.
Because really, we're missing everybody so much. Neither we are talking or this thing. So
that's true. That's true.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Doctor.
Thank you.
Doctors, our next session is at 10 o'clock. So we have half an hour before that. If there's any discussion you would like to have or anything.
No, this is a competition, so we cannot have any discussion.
All right. Perfect.
Satyajit, sir, one thing we can do, we can take a photograph also if they are present, everybody.
Yeah.
Is everybody here?
You can take a group photograph or like that.
All the presenters are requested to start their video. Others, yeah. Then the photograph will come in a nice way.
In the screen.
Yeah. See, they are on now. They are happy. All of them are happy.
So we also know that you have not disappeared.
Samitri, you'll take the photograph?
Welcome, Bali sir.
I will ask the technical support. I'm a little confused as to how I should take this.
Good morning, Dr. Bali. Welcome.
Hey, you take
welcome for the session. Welcome for the session, Dr. Bali.
It is a panoramic view. You can
hello, everyone. Ready?
Good morning, sir.
Bali sir, आ गए आप? अभी तो खत्म हो गए.
Good morning, sir. Sir, actually, I had the presentation.
He had told earlier also.
Okay.
Photo time. Smile.
Sir, yes, sir. 20 मिनट पहले आके attendance लगा के डॉक्टर सिन्हा के पास नमस्कार करके चला गया था, sir.
अच्छा लगा.
Sir, nice to see all of you, sir.
Yes, sir.
वहाँ से खत्म हुआ. I said I have to go back to my session.
मैं सुबह से देख रहा था बाली सर नहीं आए, नहीं मिल रहे. अच्छा नहीं लग रहा था.
हो गया फोटो?
हो गया. ऐसी जरूरत नहीं कर सकता, sir. दुकान में रहना है, sir.
सिन्हा सर,
थैंक यू एवरीबॉडी.
सिन्हा सर, आप व्हाट्सएप में फोटो भेजेंगे, ठीक है?
हाँ, ठीक है, हम भेज देंगे.
तो हाँ, आपको एक टास्क दिया गया है. सब जैसे स्टूडेंट को दिया जाता है ना, तो सत्यजीत साहब को एक टास्क दिया गया है.
सर नंदा सर, आपका थोड़ा सा चेहरा पर लाइट आएगा तो पता चलेगा सर.
अरे हम तो काले हैं, तो काले.
देखिए सर, जतिंदर वाली का चेहरा देखिए सर, एकदम चमक रहा है.
खिला हुआ है.
Okay, thank you everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.